I'm Ben Smith,
I'm Max Tawney.
and this is Mixed Signals from Semaphore Media.
This week on the show, we're talking to Leslie Berland, the Chief Marketing Officer for Verizon and the former CMO for a little company that was then called Twitter. We'll chat with her about her old boss, Elon Musk, and how to build a marketable brand, capture people's attention, and actually sell stuff in the age of cord cutting and digital fragmentation.
Yeah, the news cycle this week's moving a little fast. We thought we would step back with somebody whose career has really spanned the whole transformation of this media landscape.
All of that right after the break. So, Ben, as I was preparing for this episode, I was kind of reflecting back on my the beginnings of my career about 10 years ago. And one of the first things I learned is that the easiest way to kind of get to the heart of many media stories about the media, is the old cliche, which is just, follow the money, basically.
All right, Woodward.
It's a basic thing that anybody can learn.
No, but it is true.
It's true, though.
Yeah, the more time you spend doing this, the more you realize so many of these decisions that you see the media make are financial.
Well, exactly. And so, as that applies to our job in our industry, the people who are spending the money in media, who therefore have a lot of influence, are almost always the advertisers and marketers, principally the CMOs, or most powerfully the CMOs.
Yeah, I mean, it is interesting because I think when you are a media executive, when you're in a publishing business, CMOs are very, very important people, but they also are funnily often a bit outside the space of journalism, partly because I think that marketers are very concerned with controlling the story and telling stories in a very disciplined way. And so often they don't love loose free-form interviews. And so they're sometimes slightly hard to book. But we have managed to have to persuade Leslie and a few others to come on this season. And I do think that basically nobody has been more swamped by the changes in media than the people responsible for using it to sell stuff at a massive scale. And they've really lived this transformation, if probably as intensely as anybody else, as any of us sort of in the producing media.
I mean, you really pick up on that when you go to Cannes Lion, the big advertising festival, and you see the kind of folks who these people think are the most important. It's like literally, people who a lot of us have never heard of, but in 3 years, we are very, very familiar with them because, of course, news and media is always just a little bit behind kind of where the money is. But let's talk about Leslie. Like, who is she? Why should our listeners know who she is if they don't already know who she is?
Yeah, I mean, she is a real hotshot in the advertising business and somebody who ultimately writes the checks that underwrite tons of the things you consume, whether it is the Super Bowl or your favorite TikTok influencer. Her career has really tracked these dramatic changes in media. She was started sort of as a star in a very traditional advertising department of American Express, and then kind of shocked her industry by jumping to Twitter in 2016. Was then very briefly seen as the only person at Twitter who could handle Elon Musk, which the number of people who can actually do that turns out to be zero. And then followed kind of the heat of the culture to Peloton, one of the darlings of the pandemic, a brief spell there, before moving to Verizon, where she has one of these actually huge classic CMO jobs now, managing a massive budget across all sorts of platforms. But she's always been, I think, at the front end of this shift from a job that was really about buying and shaping television ads and approving television scripts to looking across a much broader, more confusing, more fragmented digital landscape.
Let's bring Leslie on.
Welcome, Leslie. Thanks for coming on.
So happy to be here.
And I guess I wanted just to start really through the lens of your own interesting career. You started in the most classic corporate environment doing PR and then advertising for American Express. And I'm curious if there was a moment when you realized just how much the business was changing and how it was going to change your job and your career.
Absolutely. So yeah, I did start my career at American Express, but was in the PR comms function. It was a really interesting time because there was the moment of sort of digital transformation that was happening in the financial services space. And that was also colliding with the rise of social media. And so, when you're sitting at a company that is a bank and also contemplating where, the world is operating in an entirely new way, getting information in an entirely new way, sort of getting control of brands and, brands being in the hands of consumers in an entirely new way. It was a really, really fascinating time. I had, from my comms job, took a role that was called VP of Online Media, but it was essentially what it became was driving social media strategy for the company. I was actually the first tweeter for American Express, if you can believe it. So my career came full circle. It was the first time you saw that sort of the younger generation, the most junior people at the company knew so much more than the most senior people at the company about something so important.
So then after you built something really interesting, you've been one of the first people to understand digital at American Express. Then you jumped to Twitter in 2016 to run marketing. Right. I'm sure some people at American Express, some of your colleagues, maybe people you knew, were kind of wondering what you were thinking. And yes. I guess, what were you thinking?
That's such a good question. It's actually as dramatic as you're making it sound. Twitter was a platform, and still is, frankly, but was a platform that I was so passionate about and was so addicted to and was a lifeline of information. And so, it was like a crossroads in life. It was sort of like I could take the linear path and, the road probably more commonly traveled, or I could do something that is, way more uncharted and unknown and in many ways risky. Jack Dorsey had just come back to the company. I was the first CMO. I was the only person on the executive team who lived in New York. And so it definitely sort of was this moment.
You were known somewhat briefly as one of the only people who could deal with Elon. This was mentioned in Ryan Mack and Kate Conger's Twitter book, which, described you as, and I'm quoting from the book, an expert in harnessing large male business egos. And now I know obviously you're limited in what you can and probably want to say about the whole saga, but just to kind of take a step back, what we're kind of curious about is, what did you learn from that experience? Like, what have you actually taken and kind of applied to the other jobs, even if you can't speak about it specifically?
I mean, this is hours and hours. I mean, how do I summarize? No, truly. Listen, there's so much to learn about how people lead, what drives decisions, what influences decisions. When you think about the platform itself and the voices on the platform, and I experienced this in all my years at Twitter, when you're getting real-time feedback loops, it also sort of changes the brain chemistry and how you think and how you operate.
Do you think Twitter kind of changed like the brains, as you say, of the people running it, whether it was Jack or Dick or you or then Elon? Like, do you think it was particularly weird in all the people who worked there? Like, was it harder to operate because everyone was losing their minds on Twitter all the time?
Yeah, I will tell you this. First of all, I used to dream in tweets. Like, I would close my eyes at night and I would see the timeline, and I was not alone. So, just so you know that. But I will say this, working at Twitter or any public open, platform, including, obviously X now and others, you definitely are trained and wired in a completely different way than anywhere else, because you are operating at a speed that is minute to minute, quite literally. You are constantly on the platform. You're constantly seeing the world unfold in ways that are beautiful and ways that are horrifying. You are getting, feedback loops from lots of different places that obviously are quite polarizing often. So absolutely, I think anyone who has or continues to work at these platforms is built different, and it is not for everybody.
You're now, like, as you suggest, in like a very normal company. You've moved on. You're the CMO of Verizon, which is like one of the classic huge CMO jobs in America. And I was actually talking to another CFO the other night. I mentioned that we were going to talk, and she said, "Isn't Leslie bored? Like, isn't this boring compared to all the craziness that she's been through in the past?"
That's a
sort
great
of
question.
Selling phone subscriptions in a basically fairly normal way. So I don't know. Is this boring?
I am the opposite of bored. I took this job because I saw both the opportunity and the need for transformation and change. This isn't stepping into a role where the expectation is to do the same thing over and over again.
And just at a high level, just sort of explain it to the audience. Like, I think Verizon and I think the telecoms industry traditionally, marketing is going out and saying our plan is 15 cents cheaper and the coverage in North Dakota is a little better. Like, it's very focused on details. It's very, which is, right. I don't know, probably most of the reason people buy phone plans. And it seems like that world is changing a bit, right? Like that's what you've been
Yeah,
brought in to change.
I think so. I think that part of what we do is incredibly core, right? How you tell those stories, I think there is, and we're experiencing it, there's massive opportunity to tell these stories and to communicate this in clearer, bolder ways. I think at the same time, there's a brand transformation that we are, driving as well. We relaunched the brand in June of last year and are now sort of building from there. And, the goal is to very much bring to life all the things that Verizon is and does in your life. It's this amazing challenge where, we are running underneath and powering every single thing you do, but we're invisible most of the time. And so it's sort of like bringing to life and telling stories about an invisibleness. But that's so critical. And that's an amazing challenge.
With that sort of relaunch of the brand, I mean, my sort of read of it is that you were kind of trying to take it away from being seen as this utility, this invisible thing, into something that feels like it's starting to edge into the space of other brands, of media brands, of entertainment brands. And I think that, it's been interesting to see these things merge. Like, it is interesting to me that you can get a Netflix Max subscription through Verizon. Like, that's a weird twist.
Yes.
And I'm curious if you see these things converging. Are those things that are sort of your customers, also sort of your competitors? Like, how do you navigate that?
Yeah, no, listen, they are absolutely our partners and our collaborators across so many realms. But I think you're hitting the most important part, which is we truly are a life company. I mean, we are really at every touch point of every part of the life cycle and family, and that sort of presence is so, and we carry that responsibility, right? It's a privilege and a responsibility.
So just to take a step back and get a sense of scale, how much money does Verizon spend on marketing every year? I'm curious.
In total, approximately $3 billion.
That is unbelievable. That is like, it's difficult to wrap your head around that. And having one person in charge. Obviously, you have a lot of folks who work with you, but
there are many people in charge. That includes all of our promotional spend, et cetera. Yes,
of course, but still, it's that's pretty significant.
Yes.
To your point about the ways in which you tell the stories about Verizon are changing. What's the breakdown of how and where you spend that $3 billion? Is it still television ads, or is it, how are you shifting that? What does that pie chart look like?
Yeah, absolutely. And it's still evolving, and it certainly depends. However, there's no question that it is evolving from linear TV to digital. Digital and social marketing specifically is extraordinary. Streaming, all of these channels and spaces, and getting increasingly personalized is where we're moving. That said, there is still a role for linear TV. Sports continues to be massive and only getting bigger. And so, my goal is to continue to elevate the brand in ways that and drive sort of awareness for what we offer. And then, of course, be super smart lower down the funnel.
So linear TV is still big, sports is still big, but obviously that other bucket, the one that we talk about in media, is that kind of creator space, right?
Yes.
How much of your life as a CMO is now about figuring out that?
Yeah, so it is. A lot of my life is spent living in that space. So I'm not spending much time trying to figure it out. I'm spending a ton of time on these platforms, deeply in these platforms.
Scrolling TikToks and Reels is what you're saying. Do you dream in them yet?
I do not dream in them yet. But I think that, each platform is different, obviously. And I've gotten in deep enough to both see the opportunity for brands and for ours that is unique and different, but also to see where trends are starting to go before they go there. And so I think that's the challenge in I think the CMO role is right now is that, we're setting vision and strategies and direction, and you really have to be in this stuff in the day-to-day to understand it.
Yeah, I'm curious, like, you're a major executive at a giant company, and then like some random influencer goes really viral and you notice it, or somebody sends it to you. Like, can you just be like, all right, Verizon's all in here? Or is there some long set of committee meetings by which point, obviously, this thing is old? Like, how do you, it's a big challenge for lots of different kinds of organizations. How do you deal with that?
Yeah. Well, oftentimes I'm the one saying, I just saw this on TikTok. This creator is starting to catch a couple. So I'm in it with the team. I am not, sometimes the team will bring, something that's like sort of a curveball, but most of the time we're in it together. We are sharing ongoing. I mean, that's how much I use these platforms as well. So in short, no, we keep these teams very, very small. It's down to a few people. We did a TikTok video with Jules LeBron, who is the creator of the demure meme and trend, and that from beginning to end was 3 days. And we actually, obviously we were all watching what was happening, and every other brand was doing their own version of the demure trend. And I was like, no, we have to go to the source, and we have to do this immediately before every other brand works with her in this way. And so again, I think if we would have even lost a day, it would have been too late. And so there's no room for committees and, reviews upon reviews or hierarchy, I think, in this space.
And maybe we can play that actually, that clip for our listeners.
Ladies, let's be mindful when we use our phones. Me, I keep it very cutesy, very demure. I reply to my text, I get to my emails, I do a few, picky, flickies. And that's why I'm at Verizon. Verizon lets me trade in a musty diva for a demure diva. Verizon lets anyone trade in a crusty phone for a new one. We don't have a crunchy phone. We don't do a cracked screen. I'm not typing on my phone and getting cuts on my fingers. I'm not charging my phone and it's weedy wada woo going crazy on me. Thank you. You said we get the bag? I take my bag. I'm very cute. I'm very respectful to the staff. I don't do crazy. I walk out with my nice new phone. And that's why I partner with Verizon. She keeps it elegant. She keeps it cutesy. She keeps it classy. She does red. She doesn't do hot pink. She's not crazy. She's very demure.
Yes.
I guess the thing that I'm really curious about in this space, and I imagine this is a challenge that you guys have and that, a lot of people in similar roles elsewhere have, is like, how do you kind of yoke a brand kind of onto something like that, like an internet kind of trend like that, without kind of making people feel, viewers or whatever, or consumers of that video feel icky or like, oh man, this is like kind of gross sponsored content. It's like, this is like selling out for this person. How do you kind of like, where is that line and how do you think about navigating that?
How do you essentially not be cringy, as the kids say?
Yes.
I think it all comes full circle around needing to heavily and intensely use these platforms in order to know the tone and the nuance around it. So as an example for this specifically, the way the ideas came together was that this guaranteed trade-in, you can trade in any phone and get a new one, was like the perfect, like we identified that as the perfect and possibly the only thing that would work with her. If we didn't have that, and this was like a get X percent off of this, or get it needed to be a visual, tangible, something that she could riff off of. And I think the other part that's so important with creators like her, and again, this was the first big brand deal that she did ever. And so what was so important in working with her was to say, be you, do you. Sometimes you start working with creators, especially those who are, just up and coming, and they go into like a corporate play. It's Verizon, and suddenly it's, there's an affect that comes and they're holding back a little bit. And, we are often pushing them to be as authentically them as they can possibly be, to avoid, Max, exactly what you're saying, is coming in as a corporation doing a brand deal. So it all starts for me with authenticity of the creator and letting them do what they do.
One of the top comments under that post, maybe the top one, is somebody congratulating her on making so much money from Verizon and saying,
Getting her bag.
I hope you made 50,000, which is a funny feature of that space. Yeah, getting her bag. It was just funny that, like, is that about the right amount? Is that about what you paid her? I felt like it was low, honestly.
Listen, I can't confirm or deny, but I will tell you, that she was very happy, and her team was very happy. I will say that, and it also enabled, once she worked with us, there were, there were so many other brands that she's worked with since then. But I will tell you, another part of the strategy is literally what you said, which is we knew that if you tracked her comments over time, people were rooting for her. Like that was part of what was happening. They wanted her to be successful and they were invested. So nothing about the response surprised any of us. I knew those comments. We're like, it's going to be like, get your bag, girl. We knew it was going to be, that was going to be a big part of it.
There's no real analogy for that in traditional media where you sell an ad and your audience thanks you and congratulates you. Like that is not
right.
the normal experience in media, although we try to produce advertising that's high quality.
Yeah, no, you're absolutely right. And that's not most creators. There are certain creators that you see that are coming up in this way.
Well, on the topic of seamlessly integrating advertising into media, we're going to take a break right here, and then we'll come back and hear more from Leslie.
This week in our branded segment from Think with Google, I spoke to Google's VP of Marketing, Josh Spanier, about how to meet consumers where they are, whether they're searching, scrolling, streaming, or shopping. So the big story of 2024 was just this massive fragmentation of media, this incredibly confusing landscape for people like us to look at, a place in which consumers, can deeply personalize what they're listening to, what they're seeing, what they're reading. And I think that makes it hard for people in your position, for marketers, to find consumers at the right place and the right time. And so how do you think about navigating that?
So I recently went to a museum and I saw up close a beautiful Jackson Pollock painting, one of his splatter canvases. And as I stood in front of that beautiful painting, I really was thinking about my own marketing services industry, as you described. The complexity of every surface and touch point and device, of PR and comms and media and AI and content, and how it all has sort of blurred together. And it is somewhat overwhelming. But then part of my job, and part of every good marketer's job, is to take a step back and try and see, I guess, the signal in the noise, or the shakes in the patterns, like you do with the Jackson Pollock. One of the things I've used is a framing around 4 key consumer behaviors: streaming, scrolling, searching, and shopping. And what we're seeing across Google's product mix and all our properties is these activities, these key human behaviors, are sort of intersecting through technology. And when we understand the consumer journeys that people are taking, we as marketers can actually help navigate those paths and actually intersect in ways which are useful and additive to consumers. So that may be someone using Google Lens with their phone, just taking a picture of something and searching for it. Or it may be someone watching and strolling through YouTube, pausing a video and using Circle to Search to search for a watch that someone in that video is wearing, and getting instantaneously a Google search shopping result, which allows you to buy that watch and then go back to watching the video. This framing, streaming, scrolling, searching, and shopping, is helping us really think through these different pathways and where we can be useful from both a technological and a marketing engagement perspective to help unpack this complex dynamic landscape, to make mess from the noise, just as Jackson Pollock helps us do with his paintings.
Brave new world. Where can people learn more about consumer behavior today?
You can head to thinkwithgoogle.com, and there's bursting with great content, great articles, and great videos to learn about this streaming, scrolling, searching, and shopping principle.
Thanks, Josh.
Thanks, Ben.
You're now operating in a world, Leslie, where these big social media platforms are shifting away from content moderation, or toward a lighter touch. And obviously, when you were at Twitter, you thought about this stuff all the time, I'm sure. But I'm curious as how you approach this new world, if you're worried about the context your ads show up in, or if you're just measuring, the increments that you sell and not so worried about the context in which they appear anymore.
Yeah, I mean, we care about all of it, right? You care about the message, you care about it being in the right place in the right moment in the right time, and we care about it being in a safe context and an appropriate context always. I think there is a very rapid rate of change that is underway. And by the way, these things, in my experience, they evolve over time, right? Oftentimes changes are made, and then, each platform learns and evolves and understands sort of what's working, what's not working. These things are typically not linear, but certainly there is a lot of change underway. So I think it's just really important to always look at the business objectives and what we're trying to achieve and the goals that we need to meet, and as well as our customers and what being sensitive to them and our values. But every brand right now has to be understanding that things are changing and they're going to continue to change. So I don't think we were ever in a place of at least I never felt that there was a firm anchor in this space because, again, my world, in my experience, this was something that was always in conversation and was challenging, and we just need to be able to navigate it.
Do you think advertisers are going to push Meta, X, other companies back toward content moderation, towards safer environments, or do you think that era is totally over?
Listen, I think it's all very early right now. I think that there's, you see what platforms sort of announce and communicate, but then it's also really important to have very strong and deep relationships at these companies and with the teams at these platforms, because you get so much deeper, right? What we're all reading about and you're all reading about are the policies, and what we want to understand are the tools and the tools available to us and what this actually looks like, and get our questions answered. And so it's very, very early right now, but all the platforms have been very collaborative.
So as we're recording this, it's still unclear what's going to happen with TikTok. But I'm curious, from your perspective, what does a world without TikTok look like for you and for Verizon? I mean, you've spent all this time getting to know influencers and TikTokers, and you're like deeply plugged into this space. What does it actually mean if something changes?
Yeah, I think probably it's probably even bigger than the question that you're asking. I think foundationally so much changes from a culture and trend standpoint at baseline. Like, putting creators aside for a second, there is so much, like, the purchasing power, the purchasing decisions and behaviors that are influenced by this platform overall is massive, from music, sports, entertainment, everything across beauty, apparel, all of it. So that would be a significant shift. In terms of the creators and the influencers we work with, they're on numerous platforms. Some of them are, go longer form. They're on YouTube. Some are, many of them are Instagram. We spend a lot of time on Instagram and focused on Instagram as well. That is where a lot of our customers are and engage. But we work with Snap. We advertise on Facebook. So we're obviously in a lot of different places. But I do think, there is no underestimating the dramatic impact of this.
Speaking of kind of upcoming interesting kind of media moments, the biggest media moment for marketing in the U.S. is always obviously the Super Bowl. Last year, you guys did a Super Bowl ad with Beyonce. This year, you guys, I understand, are skipping the game and doing activations across, I guess my notes are telling me 30 different stadiums. How do you think about that, and why you guys are deciding to do something different this year? What's the thinking?
And we're not skipping the game. We're just skipping advertising during the game.
Not doing Beyonce again.
We will,
at the game,
exactly. We'll be there, and we'll be on the ground doing lots of activations in New Orleans as well. But I think this goes back to the conversation we were having earlier about doing things that are very ownable to Verizon, that put our customers at the center, that is sort of zigging where everyone else is zagging. What is exciting for us watching this all unfold is, the Super Bowl hasn't even happened, and the conversation about what we're doing is very loud and very broad across the entire country. And so there's something really interesting about capturing organic conversation, and we're doing some advertising, but the press and the comms around this has been absolutely extraordinary, and importantly at the local level, sort of bringing this sort of big company type of experience like the Super Bowl, which so few people get to actually experience, and bringing that experience to people in ways that quite literally no one else can. So this is where it's an ambitious plan, 30 concurrent events happening, biggest Super Bowl party ever. It'll be really amazing. We're excited.
Is that cheaper or more expensive than one Super Bowl ad with Beyonce?
I will not answer that question, but I will say that it is money very well spent.
Just to conclude, a final question. We basically every week on this show, we're talking about these sweeping changes in the media, this sort of shift toward individuals, whether they call them creators, influencers, brands, and this intense fragmentation where where it's so hard, that just people are consuming from all different directions and different things. And the business around it's going to continue to evolve, continue to get more sophisticated. And I guess we're curious, where do you think it's heading? What's the next big innovation that you see coming down the pike?
Yeah, I love that you asked this question, because I think that it goes back to what you were talking about, linear TV. There's a historical sort of draw to sort of the blanketing. And what is very, very clear and is only going to become further intensified is, you called it fragmentation, but it is these micro communities and these micro passions and these micro interests and ways of talking within those contexts that are getting more and more specific. And, speaking, with people, not at people. I think that entire space and world is going to continue to intensify in that way, because there are so many platforms and so many opportunities and outlets for people to sort of connect on very specific things. So it's all about really getting local and nuanced and understanding your audiences. And again, above all else, being able to move very, very quickly.
And is the path to that, like armies of Leslie Berlins spending 10 hours a day on TikTok or whatever the TikTok successor is? Or is it the kind of, to me, slightly scary hyper-personalization that AI can bring, where every single individual is being marketed to differently? And how do you, that sounds like a lot of work, honestly, marketing to zillions of communities with 10 people in the niche.
Yeah, listen, I think that obviously, and it's too late to go deep into obviously the AI conversation, but I think responsibly using the new technologies to meeting the right people in a non-scary way, I will say, delivering the message that is most important and most relevant to you or groups of you is obviously the goal. In terms of a million Leslies, I don't think anybody wants that. But I do think that every single marketer needs to be understanding these platforms. They need to be users of these platforms. There's, in my view, no way to do this job without that hands-on understanding.
All right, we'll look forward to seeing you on Little Red Book or wherever we are next.
Look at you. That's a hilarious trend underway. That's right.
So strange.
Right. It's very strange, but it's very funny content, I have to say.
Okay, absolutely. Thank you so much, Leslie. We really appreciate it.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Super, super fun to chat with Leslie. She's so dynamic and, not as, you had kind of had the disclaimer, a lot of CMOs are kind of buttoned up or buttoned down. I don't know what exactly
I would say.
Careful, exactly.
Careful around journalists.
And she's careful around journalists, but it was an interesting window into just how these folks are, CMOs at the biggest companies, are thinking about spending their money in media, right?
I mean, it's this kind of great flattening you see everywhere. Like the CMO is obsessively watching TikTok, seeing something happen on there, and just as fast as she can, getting to that creator and doing a deal. It's very opportunistic and fast, and just miles away from what used to be this very kind of careful, slow moving, we're planning next year's Super Bowl ad kind of business. Well, that stuff, of course, happens too.
It's really interesting to me too how much is not market or research driven. You would imagine that the TV ads, there's a lot of data that goes into okay, we're going to do these ad buys here, and this is where we're looking to grow, and we want to compete in this place. This is literally just I'm the CMO, my team sent me this really funny video, and let's get this person on the horn and bang one of these things out really quickly. And I didn't realize how much of the job was literally going to be knowing creators and kind of having good impulses around what works in that space.
And I'm sure there's also piles of boring stuff in research and data, of course, but you referred to the bottom of the funnel in passing, but actually spending a lot of time thinking, it's just the sort of speed at which you got to move now. I mean, that's true in our business too.
But I think it's also interesting too, because that's probably part of the job that you can't kind of eventually have AI do, right? AI can tell you where to do your ad buys probably. What it can't tell you is which of these, creators is going to be really good to collaborate with, and just how to get the right tone. And, we don't want to do a phone plan thing. We want to do a phone, trade your phone in type of thing. I don't know. It seems to me that's there's a little bit of gut skill there.
It's interesting because the big story of marketing of the last 30 years is the creative part of it getting replaced by ad tech, and the sort of technical aspects of marketing sort of sweeping aside the old Mad Men stuff. But it is interesting as the technical stuff gets fully, truly automated, that there's this kind of return of an obsession with how do you talk about your brand, and with the basically intuitive stuff.
It's a creator-focused Don Draper. It's have you seen that meme of Don Draper with the bus-in kind of haircut? Do you know what I'm talking about at all?
I have no idea what you're talking about. Can you
we're going to have
explain it to me?
There's no way. There's no way possibly to explain what this means. It's just him with the Zoomer haircut. It's incredible. There's a few people who are in the advertising and marketing space. They'll know what it is. But that's it's funny how much maybe it's very slightly true to life.
What do you make of Verizon's ambitions to sort of like edge into what I think of as the media space? Like if you're like watching a great show on Netflix, like it sounds like Leslie wants Verizon to get like a bit of credit for that in a way.
I think it's totally fascinating, and it actually does get a little bit at solving what is the ultimate frustration of cord cutting, which is like, can't I just pay for all of this shit with one thing? And I think that is like actually, it's something that a lot of media companies have tried to solve. You can see that Google has tried to solve that to a certain degree with, YouTube TV, which bundles and packages different things. So I think it is really interesting that they've slightly edged into that space and addressing a serious concern that most consumers have.
Totally. It drives everybody crazy. And as you say, right, but we all know, of course, like YouTube, Amazon, Apple are all trying to jump into that space, but there's also this competition from the layer above them, which is the telecom. And it's this funny kind of competition. I mean, the other thing that's sort of interesting about it is that AT&T disastrously purchased Warner Media as their way of getting into that space. And I think what you're seeing Verizon and its competitors do is be like, well, we don't have to buy these guys. We can just we have so much leverage in terms of getting them in terms of being able to help them drive renewals and drive sales of their subscriptions, that we can kind of push them into letting us market them. I mean, like the fact that you can buy a subscription combined to Netflix and HBO is like is kind of a sign of the weakness of those companies in terms of converting subscribers and the strength of these other layers of the ecosystem. It's really kind of wide open competition.
Do you think that those companies, the Netflixes and, Warner and Netflix are on different levels, but do you think that they sense like that is a place of vulnerability for them?
Well, I think they also, yes, I think they do. Like churn is just this terrible problem for all of them, and holding on to subscribers at any cost, true for Disney too, very important. And so they will give a lot to partners who can help them with that. Conversely, I do think they know, and the lesson we learned is that these companies are not really going to get into the media business. Verizon had its disastrous experiments in the media business. AT&T had its disastrous experiments in the media business. It's going to be like a whole generation of telecom executives before they make that mistake again.
Right. And why would you want to be in the media business when you can just basically sell media anyway through what you're doing, through partnerships?
Why indeed, Max?
I think we've made an effective argument against our own business, but we'll leave it at that for today. Thank you so much for listening to Mixed Signals from Semaphore Media. If you've made it this far, thank you. This is what a treat. Our show is produced by Sheena Ozaki with special thanks to Max Toomey, Britta Galanis, Chad Lewis, Rachel Oppenheim, Anna Pizzino, Garrett Wiley, and Jules Zern. Our engineer is Rick Kwan, and our theme music is by Billy Libby. Our public editor this week is Jack Dorsey.
He's always watching. And if you liked Mixed Signals, please follow us wherever you get your podcasts, and feel free to review us.
And if you want more, you can always sign up for Semaphore's media newsletter out every Sunday night.